Welcome to the show. I'm Olivia Nunn, and this is where we rise, rebuild, and remember that storms don't break us, they reveal us. Let's get into it. I'm here with my good friend, Colton Smith, and you probably recognize that name because he's a Christian, a husband, a father, a decorated operations infantryman, but you probably know this name because he was the UFC Ultimate Fighter. And we've got a story to tell you. So, Colton, thank you so much for being here with me today and telling your rock bottom moments and how you rose to the top.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for calling me and having me come on board.
Yeah, so, people see you and think that, life must be easy with all of your accomplishments. You're about to retire from the Army. You've got a storied history of just amazing accomplishments. So life must be just great, right? And because you've accomplished so much in your life, you must have come from great beginnings. But that's not necessarily true. So walk us through, who is Colton Smith? Where did you come from? And why that's not necessarily the truth.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the cards I was dealt early on in life, I could have a lot of excuses as to why things didn't pan out well in my life or in favor of that. And a lot of what I've done in my adult life has been to fight kind of generational curses, if you will, whether that be, poverty, alcoholism, divorce, just a lot of things that have perpetuated kind of results in my family for history forever. I mean, forever, as far back as I can go. Those three things have been kind of a factor in a lot of the lives of my relatives. And it's not to throw any shade at them by any means, but I do believe that somebody has to step up and break those generational curses. And I have been very stubborn in the pursuit of that. I've made mistakes along the way. I've definitely not always done exactly what I should be doing by any means, but I have kept that at the kind of the forefront of my mind that I'm trying to do the best I can to provide not only a life that I didn't have for my children, but also the principles that maybe I wasn't necessarily raised with, but I try to instill those in my children as well as my subordinates in the military and beyond.
So, because of your background, was that the reason that led you to the Army, or who and what was the reason that compelled you to be part of the Army?
Yeah, I would say I was somewhat lost. I was somewhat lost when it came to the Army and what I was going to do after high school. I didn't really know what I was going to do, and then I knew I wanted to wrestle. I wanted to try to wrestle in college, and I knew that that probably wasn't going to happen for financial reasons. So then I found out you could wrestle in the Army, and I looked at trying to wrestle for the Army, and it was kind of the height of the war in Iraq. And I ended up joining the airborne infantry, and found myself in Iraq shortly after. And I joined at 17. My mother had to sign me up, kind of passed me off to the government, if you will, the Army at 17. So I was really young, and I was somewhat lost. I really didn't know what I wanted to do or what I was going to do. So that's one of those things where it was a defining moment for me, and definitely was the beginning of my story where I am today in my adult life.
So, how did Colton Smith, who joined the Army, end up becoming a leader and then ultimately the ultimate fighter?
You know, my first deployment in Iraq was a turning point for several reasons. We lost 54 people in my brigade. It was the deadliest part of the war in Iraq. It was during the surge, 2006, 2008 timeframe. It was a deployment that I believe we are supposed to start at like 9-month deployment. Then it went to a year. Then it went to 15 months. Then it went to 18 months. One of those long surge deployments. And during that deployment, there were several instances where either through loss of life or poor decision making on my part or my leadership's part, where it was kind of a turning point for me in a positive way, taking a negative turn into a positive. One of those was a story has to do with meatloaf from a Mermite. We were living in a bridge across Route Tampa, checkpoint 21, in between Escandaria and Haswa, Iraq, down by in between really Fob Kalsu and kind of Fob Falcon, or maybe even Baghdad, kind of in the middle there on Route Tampa. And every now and then we'd be lucky enough to get a hot meal from Mermites, which didn't happen that often because Route Tampa was generally black, meaning impassable for anybody that wasn't, convoys and stuff like that weren't I guess, mission specific to somewhere in Baghdad or further south. And well, the Mermites came, and I went out there with my team, and we downloaded the Mermites, and I was like, you know what? We can eat first because we got the Mermites, right? So we go out there, we eat first, and there's it says like 36 on there for the meatloaf, and oh, there's my kitty. And so we had 36 meatloafs in there. Well, on the bridge, we only had, I don't know, 12 or 13 people on the bridge. So I decided to grab a couple after my guys ate and the succotash and everything on my plate. And an NCO came out, and he wasn't one of my NCOs, but he was a NCO in one of the mounted sections that were attached to the other my infantry unit out there. And they came out, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, my guys downloaded the Mermites, so we're eating." And I was a PFC, but so I had my gun team out there, and we got everything loaded up on our plates. And he's like, "No one told you could eat." I'm like, "All right, well, we downloaded the Mermites, so I figured my guys and I will eat." He's like, "Well, why'd you take 2 pieces of meatloaf?" And I'm like, "Well, there's 36 pieces of meatloaf in here, and there's only 12 or 13 of us on the bridge, so you can do the math, and that means we could probably have at least two, if not three, meatloafs apiece." He kept telling me to put it back, so eventually he put his hands on me, and I put the my whole plate in the meatloaf and succotash, mashed potatoes, and everything, and ended up getting into a little bit of a spout with this NCO, physical spout, and got broken up by the platoon sergeant. And long story short, they were gonna like just go after me for this, even though he put his hands on me first. And long story short, it came out that we just kind of tempers flared. We got no fight over it. So we got back for refit. Every 10 days we'd go get a hot shower and be able to refit while somebody came out, and like tankers came out and hung out on the checkpoint with us. And we took a take over our battle positions while we were getting some a little bit of R&R for a day or two. And basically my platoon sergeant and my PL, instead of throwing the hammer at me for getting into it, the NCO, they had me apologize to the platoon. And that was kind of a turning point for me, honestly. That moment on, my career kind of excelled. And that was kind of a low point, obviously, when I didn't know what was going to happen to me. They're throwing out some crazy stuff. You beat up on an NCO and you're a Joe, and we're going to crucify you for it. The truth came out. Me and that NCO, I won't say his name, we're still friends to this day. So we definitely made amends. But that was a turning point because I'll admittedly, I was hot-headed. I thought a lot of myself back then. Kind of that jock mindset. And in the infantry, you get a little arrogance as well. So that definitely humbled me, knowing that I could have, basically lost my career before it started over something very trivial. So that was probably the first kind of turning point for me on that deployment, aside from losing soldiers and leaders and peers later on in that deployment. But so I would say, yeah, I mean, that was kind of what made me grow up very quickly as a 17, 18-year-old young man, kind of forged in fire, if you will, in Iraq.
You talked about kind of like a very small, low point, right? A rock bottom moment that could have been pivotal for you in terms of ending a career, but it didn't. Talk to me about some of the moments, besides the fact that you've talked to us about, your humble beginnings, that could have been some hard bottom moments for you that if you didn't really dig in to reshape the life that you had.
Yeah, that's a difficult thing. Early on in my career, in a few of the units that I was in, I learned a lot about what not to be as opposed to what to be, unfortunately, by some of my leadership. And that's also something that I've taken with the rest of my life and I had a young leader that actually imparted that on me. His name was Corporal Omar Hernandez, and Silver Star recipient, Bronze Star with Valor, Archon with Valor, just two Purple Hearts. Omar is an amazing man and someone that I still look to this day for guidance. And he kind of taught me that, look, we may not have the best leadership, and it was kind of well known at the time. In fact, I thought Ashton Kutcher was going to come out and be like, "You got punked, bro." But I think that's something that I've taken with me, is you can always learn from anybody and everybody. Again, it may not be maybe a situation where you're just doing a 180 from what they do and you'll be successful. But I think that's something that I've carried with me, and it seems so simple, and it is simple. But again, not dwelling on the negatives. And something I've done throughout my life, and a lot of that was raised by single mother and my grandfather in my life, my wrestling coach growing up. I have always done my best to try to take that kind of glass half full approach, as opposed to glass half empty. And may sound easier said than done when it comes to that in life, when life deals different things to you. I mean, I had a lot of childhood, I guess you could say childhood trauma, if you will, things that happen, some self-inflicted, but definitely lessons that I've looked back on. And maybe at the time I didn't fully understand what I was going through and why I was going through that. And as a man of faith, I see now why I was put in those situations. And so I can hopefully not only mentor my children, but also those within my span of influence in the military, as well as at the gyms with the fighting instruction.
So, how did you end up as an active duty soldier into Ultimate Fighter? How did that happen for you? Like, how does a soldier even end up in that arena?
Yeah, it's a crazy story. So I was on deployment to Iraq, and I went to a local market, and I got UFC 1 to 43 bootleg DVDs and a portable DVD player. So in between patrols and missions and QRF, Quick Reaction Force, and doing security and everything on the joint security station we lived on, I would watch these UFC 1 to 43, and I got hooked. And before that, I'd probably seen VHSs of it back in the day when UFC first came out from Blockbuster or something. Probably aging myself there. Um, but I look at that and I was like, you know what, I can do that. You know, I grew up fighting. I was always kind of scrapping, always kind of what I would consider like I would never shy away from a fight, if you will. Kind of undersized, the underdog in a lot of ways. And so I kind of always had that chip on my shoulder that I'd fight anybody, anytime, anywhere before I even really knew how to fight, which is kind of naive looking back, but ignorant, if you will. And I see that and I watch these DVDs. And so I started, practicing the moves in the front yard of our joint security station, little dirt path we had outside the little motor pool we had. And I mean, Iraqis would come out and I'd wrestle them if they wrestled, if there was any of the ODAs that came through and there was anybody that did combatives or wrestled or fought, I'd try these moves on them or spar them in the front yard. And I remember telling my platoon, I'm like, you know what? Because I knew I was on UFC like 43, the DVD that I had. And at the time, UFC was probably like up to like 50. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be in UFC 150. You watch, And they all looked at me like I was crazy. I had this punching bag, and so it was like a 3-story house, big, beautiful home in Western Baghdad that we lived in. And I hung. There was no electricity, but I hung the punching bag from the chandelier, but it was like in the stairwell. And so at nighttime, people would be going out to patrol or whatever, and there's no lights in there if you don't have your headlamp on. And they'd bump into it, and they'd cuss me, be all upset that I, get this thing out of here, Smith. So honestly, ignorance is bliss. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be a fighter, this and that. So I come back from that deployment, and 7 or 8 days later, I find myself at a weigh-in for a fight in Winchester, Virginia, and as it were, I was trying to build a relationship with my father, who I didn't grow up with, and I met when I was 13 years old and only saw him maybe a total of a month and a half from the time I was 13 to 17 when I joined the Army. I'd see him possibly for a week here, a week there, for 4 years after I met him. So I was trying to build a relationship with him. I was on post-deployment leave. We ended up at an MMA weigh-in in Winchester, and as fate would have it, someone didn't make weight or didn't show up, and they called out to the crowd and said, do we have any 185-pound fighters that want to step up and fight this kid from West Virginia, Rob Wine? And so I raised my hand, and I'm sitting at the bar, and admittedly, I think I was underage drinking at the time. And I raised my hand, and I said, yeah, and they kind of look out like over the lights. They're like, wait, are you even a fighter? Because I wasn't with like, the fight teams that were there for the weigh-in. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a fighter. So I get up there and get on the scale, and I'm a little overweight. So I run around the bar a little bit. And I wrestled growing up, so I know how to cut weight. So I ran around the bar. Then I laid down in the bathroom of this bar with Carhartt jackets over top of me in January in Winchester, 2008. Sweat a little bit, cut a couple pounds. The guy took the fight. That night, I go back and I look at MySpace, and I MySpace the dude. I look him up. Rob Wine was his name, and I'm like, holy moly, this guy can actually fight. He had videos. I was like, this is crazy. What am I doing? And I was the first fight of the night the following day. And luckily, as fate would have it, God obviously put me there for a reason. And I ended up winning in the first round. And that was kind of the start of my fighting career. So then I just was on this crazy adventure of trying to be an infantryman, a leader, and then be a fighter simultaneously. And conventional wisdom would tell you can't do both of them at a high level. But I was set to make sure I could show that I proved that I could, because I had a lot of leadership. For every 3 or 4 leaders that didn't support me, I had one that did, thankfully, and allowed me to kind of do that. But I will say, and I like to make sure I put this out there, I received no preferential treatment from this. I've never have. If anything, I've had the opposite of preferential treatment. I've had more leaders that have tried to kind of stick it to me, to be honest with you. But I took 54 days of leave for the Ultimate Fighter television show. That was the only time in my career where I was able to focus solely on fighting. And I ended up winning the show. I ended up beating everybody on the show. And I was a huge underdog, probably one of the biggest underdogs in the show's history. So, yeah, that's pretty wild. But from the time that I said that I'm going to be on UFC, 150, I won the show probably about 4 years later. I won the Ultimate Fighter television show, had several amateur fights, several pro fights before that, and then won all 5 fights on the show, and won the season 16. And that was all just something that I prophesized and truly believed in my heart and soul that God put it there for a reason, and I was able to accomplish that.
So you talk a lot about confidence and toughness, and that's the outside, right? That's what you portrayed in order to get to the goal that you wanted. You said that you're going to do this and you did it, but people don't see the internal, right? The internal battles, the internal struggles. What is that they didn't see? Not only just you becoming the Ultimate Fighter and becoming a champion, but what are the battles that people don't see back then and even now that you struggle with?
Yeah, so and I'm transparent, especially this time in my life. I'm comfortable in my skin, so I'm very open and honest about struggles growing up. I grew up, and this is something that kind of has played a part in my day-to-day life as an adult. Growing up, I grew up in a upper middle class community in Iowa. It was a suburb of Des Moines, and it still is a phenomenal place to raise a child. However, social status wise, most of my classmates, most people I grew up with came from money. They came from influence. They had everything, I wouldn't say handed to them, but a lot of them were kind of silver spoon, if you will, silver spoon fed based on their last name and where they were from, where their family's from. And I didn't have that. My family was kind of known as tough, hardworking, blue collar, if you will, but definitely below that threshold of where the rest of the town was. So I probably would have been better off if I would have been in the inner city like some of my peers that I wrestled with. And it would have been a little easier on me socially to be around people probably in the same social status as me. So there was some identity crisis there, some issues that I had growing up where I didn't feel like I truly belonged in that group of people. But honestly, it was more of like a chip on my shoulder. I need to prove myself. And I had to. Every sport that I played, I didn't have the right last name in the community that I was in. My family's not paying into booster clubs and stuff like that. So I had to fight tooth and nail for everything that I achieved as a young man in wrestling growing up, in sports growing up. And then definitely as an adult, I've kind of carried that same kind of work ethic. Like I have a lot to prove. And again, to try to break those generational curses, to honor my mom, to honor my grandfather who passed away, and then just to kind of honor my family name and my kids especially. So trying to build them a foundation and a understanding. So I struggle with, you could say I struggle with confidence internally. Externally, no one saw that probably, but internally I definitely struggled with confidence and do I belong? And that has definitely bled over into other parts of my life, in the UFC, especially when I was fighting in the UFC and doing that, do I belong here? But all of that, and I don't regret anything, any decisions I've made, whether to get out of the military, chase UFC full time, or to stay in the military or do both simultaneously. There's nothing that I regret with that. Nothing would have changed. I would have continued to try to do both at the highest level until I wasn't able to anymore. And again, none of that is just from the tutelage I had from my single mother raising me and my sister, as well as my grandfather, my wrestling coach. Those are 3 people that have really made a profound impact on me. And none of them are perfect. Obviously, nobody's perfect, but they all have their negatives about them. However, what they gave me and imparted on me is something that I'll carry with me forever in everything I do.
What I like about being a storyteller is that I love the fact that I find is that we have more commonality than we do differences, regardless of gender and regardless of our upbringing, regardless of our faith and our ethnicity. And there was 2 things that you said that I identified in your story, right? I grew up in a similar neighborhood where, they were affluent, they had money, but my family didn't, right? and to feel like you belonged and fit in when everybody else had money and we didn't. My dad was in the army, but he purposely put himself in a neighborhood so that his kids could be in a better situation. And it's hard when you're like trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? And then also being a biracial first generation American where I didn't look like anybody else. And that was odd and different and just trying to belong. And then just, wondering if you belonged and trying to prove yourself every single day when you're a female in a man's military, especially in combat arms, when you're the only one that's showing up as a woman and just having to prove every single day that you have a seat at the table and you should have a seat at the table. So while, from a different perspective, but at the same time, those are the same common threads that you just spoke about and how I can resonate with that. In your story, was there ever a moment that you just completely almost broke and that from the outside, no one would have known that you were completely breaking apart and you were able to kind of work through that? And if so, what were the tools that you used to be able to just, from a visual perspective, kind of glue yourself back together and rise?
Yeah, I lost a really good friend of mine in combat, and we went through everything together up to that point in our military careers. He came from Clearwater, Florida. I came from the mean streets of Iowa. But when we met together, after basic training in airborne school, and then from airborne school to our first units, and then from our first units, both the deployments and everything else, we definitely formed a bond and a brotherhood, which you form with most of your squad mates, but we were roommates for a long time. I mean, every place we moved to, we ended up together somehow as roommates, right? Every small little barracks we moved to or wherever we were living at. And when he passed away, that was really difficult for me. And a lot of it was based around my faith of why it was difficult for me. Rossi admittedly he wouldn't go to church with me, didn't like to talk about it. He lost his mother when he was a teenager abruptly. He lost one of his brothers as well, and had kind of a rough upbringing with that. And he struggled with his faith because of that. He was saved previously, and when he passed away, one of the biggest things that I struggled with, and I was still somewhat young and naive as a Christian, I really struggled with the fact that I wasn't able to be a better friend to him or a better disciple for Christ, if you will, for him. And that's something that really just stuck a knife in my heart until another kind of mentor of mine spoke to me about it and said, look, when Rossi was shot, he was shot by a sniper on 1 July of that deployment, and hit in the back of the head. He lived like 30 minutes after, but he ended up passing away by the time he got back to Camp Liberty. And dealing with that, and then seeing, kind of my heart hurting for him and his family, and knowing that, I wasn't sure if he knew God and where he was after that. And then I say a mentor, but somebody who wasn't more than 3 or 4 years older than me, basically tell me, you don't know the relationship Rossi had with God, especially that last 30 minutes that he was on this earth before his soul left his body. And it really gave me some peace in that moment. And it's something that, although it took a little time to truly conceptualize that and understand that, I believe in my heart that I know where Rossi's at. And just to kind of have that calming, and having just another infantryman, another guy that I served with, telling me, reassuring me, and it just was definitely, that was a turning point in my faith. There's a lot more out there, a lot more people that I can reach to that have the wisdom that I can find by not turning to alcohol, not turning to drugs, not turning to partying. And what you see a lot, especially in this community, you see that when things are going bad in someone's life, they lose a soldier, they lose a loved one, they go through a divorce, they, just the bad negative things that can happen in your day-to-day lives. There are a lot of people that turn to those vices, if you will, and can spiral out of control. So luckily for me, and this is just speaking for me, and I always try to implore people to find their outlet, find their why, if you will. For me, my outlet's always been being able to fight, being able to instruct. When I say fight obviously in the gym, not fight outside the gym. And that's always been a good outlet for me, and even just working out in general. And so finding that good constructive way to be able to just release all the stresses of life, because it's going to be difficult, and I know that. I know life is never going to be easy, and never what maybe we see people portray on social media. Actually, I saw one of your posts recently where you elaborated to that. You talked about that in one of your posts. And that resonated with me because that's one of those things where, of course, we're going to show the good, and rarely do we show the bad and the ugly on social media, especially to some of the strangers that are on there that are on our platforms. But for me, the biggest thing is finding that release, finding what fuels me outside of work, what fuels me even outside of family. Like, what is something that I can turn to that isn't a negative vice, but it's something that can help me get through the difficulties, whether, again, losing a loved one, losing a soldier, divorce, breakups, friends turning their back on you. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've endured and went through like that as well. I'm just in all those categories. And it'd be very easy just to quit and just kind of allow your circumstance to define you. But that's one thing that I've been so stubborn about, I'll never give up on, is not allowing my circumstance to define me if it's a negative situation.
You just talked about, quite a few categories, right, that can bring someone to their knees. And I completely agree with you, right? Loss of friends, whether it was downrange in combat, we both have experienced that. Also friends coming home, right? Whether it's to cancer or to suicide, or to health related issues. Neither one of those are easy. Or a loss of a marriage, right? We both have been able to luckily find new partners and new friendships on the other side of that. But, divorces are never easy, and nobody wins in those situations, and they change you. And especially when you have kids involved, right? That makes it even harder when you have kids that have to go through that with you. And then businesses, and then change of identity as you come out of the uniform. And then, your walk in faith, right? That's, for me, has always been like this constant struggle for myself as I struggle with a lot of questions of why this time, why not more, working through patience, because I'm not a patient person, right? I mean, here I am, a type A aggressive female, hence why I probably went into the Army and was very good at it, right? Just working through all of those issues. And what I've learned is that losses can be very humbling. And I've learned that in the military. And trying to work through defeat, although there's lessons in that, is still very soul crushing. Was that for you? And then how were you able to come through on the other side, regardless of what those situations were?
Yeah. You speak about it, like the divorce and just like the impact on children. And I grew up with that. I grew up with a few different stepdads and a few different guys that were in my life, and seeing what happens when there's that ever evolving door of someone coming in and out of your life, and kind of the rejection you feel even as a child. So now compound that as an adult where it happens again. And then you think about your children and the impact on them, and how you're trying to kind of stop that kind of vicious cycle of perpetuating itself in your life as well. But as you know, sometimes it's unavoidable. And at the end of it, when you come on the other side of it and you kind of rise above all of that, you see that obviously it wasn't meant to be, and you can, beat yourself in the head constantly until you try to make something work. It's not going to happen, especially if it's not God's will and it's not meant to be. It's not going to happen. And I believe that even for myself, that I am a much better person, much better father, all around today than I was previously. And I can honestly say that, confidently say that. And I believe that I'm a more attentive father. I'm a better father, and I'm a better husband to my wife, Samantha. Like, I truly believe that who I am today, and I continually try to be that better version of myself. And that sounds cliche, but it's the truth. And it's something that I've kind of had almost a light bulb moment with, especially when it comes to raising three wild children, a 7-year-old daughter and 13, 15-year-old boys. It's a handful, but it's something that I look at and I understand the importance of what I'm doing as a father and the leader of this household. And then you look at other parts of your life with losses, and losses could be anything. It could be your furloughed, your uncertainty of your next paycheck. That could be a loss. I mean, there's a lot of things happening right now in today's society. We look at the government jobs, and that's always been kind of a safety blanket for most people. Well, now there's a lot of government employees that are furloughed, and I see that. My wife's one of them. She's furloughed right now, and I see some of the younger government employees who may not have the same kind of savings, and may not, had a kind of rainy day savings because they just got out of the military and now they're in a government job, or they're waiting to be hired. I have one of the guys on my team like that. He's retiring, waiting to be hired for a GS position. And now he's kind of in a standstill, and I see kind of the turmoil that he's going through and trying to give him good counsel. Yeah, I mean, just in general with the kind of uncertainty in society at times, and and I see it at the gym because like our gym's kind of the melting pot. You have every walk of life in that gym. You have the Lance Corporal, and then you have like the 2-star level Sergeant Major, the Marine Sergeant Major who's there. Then you have the GS-15. Then you have like the GS, sixth person that works the commissary that's young, that's just getting into the workforce. And you have police officers, and you have, former, pothead, all on the same mat together. So I see just every walk of life on those mats and see like kind of, and a lot of it we talk, it's almost like therapy for us. So hearing some of the different struggles people are having nowadays that maybe wasn't as prevalent 10, 15 years ago. And then again, finding that outlet, finding ways we can try to combat that and rise above that. And it takes a tribe, it takes a village. It does. It takes literally, like, I can't do this on my own. Like at the gym, I can't do it on my own. It takes the assistant coaches helping. It takes people on those mats that help me stay on azimuth in my life when I have questions or business or issues I'm having personally, professionally. So we cannot do this alone. I don't care how awesome someone looks online or like they're just like a one-man army. We cannot do this alone. We have to have a tribe around us. And I really hope that people find that tribe, whether it's in church or it's at a jiu-jitsu gym or it's at a book club, whatever it may be. Find that outlet, that positive outlet, not at a bar, not, turning the bottle up or finding drugs or whatever it may be. And that's obviously for you and I as active duty and as veterans. Like, I feel like that's something that's near and dear to our hearts because we've seen it time and time again where people turn to that bottle, turn to different substance abuses, or again, those bad vices. And it's hard not to circle back on that when we talk about, struggles and tribulations in life.
Absolutely. What I loved about what you said and what you really hinted, if people were really listening, is that you took accountability in through those hard rock moments, those bottom moments, and took a look at yourself, right? You took a look at the man in the mirror and said that I'm the common denominator, and how do I improve myself? It's easy to blame everybody else, right? Your past partner, the past relationships, the mom, the dad, the aunts, the uncles, your past teammates. It's easy to do that. But you have to look at yourself and take accountability because you're the common denominator that's going to go into the next relationship, right? With your business partner, with your next partner, as the teammate, right? As the father, and say, what did I do wrong? And how can I be better so that I can show up better as my true, authentic, better self? And I love how that you take accountability, because Topaz and I talk about that a lot, that we are better people for ourselves, and then we are better for each other in this go around. And we're lucky for that. And we're blessed for that because we had to do that hard work. And I feel like sometimes people don't want to do that.
Yep. No, absolutely.
So shifting a little bit, transition is about to happen for you. You're about to hang up your uniform. It's right around the corner. And I'm so excited for you when that happens. And you've got so much coming along the pipeline. But, a huge part of that community, and you talked about it, is the mat, right? Jiu-jitsu. And I totally agree with you. Community is so important, whether it's on the mats or it's hitting the gym, but whatever, community outside of the bottle, right? Or substance use. But for you, what is that mission change going to be like? What can people expect as you go through this change? Who is Colton Smith going to be when he hangs up that uniform?
It would be difficult. It will be difficult. And I feel like it would be a lot more difficult if I wasn't staying in the kind of general area where I've served for over half of my career. And I will still have that connection with the unit. I'll still have connection with the people. I'll definitely have some FOMO for sure. I really feel like that's one thing, especially given different world events and things going on. I will definitely have that FOMO in the back of my heart, back of my mind, if you will. But I think being closely connected with the community in ways outside of the uniform already, I would like to say that it's not going to be as difficult. Now, I know that may be a little naive because I am going to miss even the hard times definitely the people, especially the ones who I may not be around too much outside of uniform or outside of work right now. So, I want to be more, I want to be there for my children more. I want to, especially my boys, I've missed a great deal of their childhood from deployments and just being gone for training and just everything else that the commitment that we made to our country kind of brought on. And I want to make sure that, I look at my oldest, he only has 3 years left in the house really. And I want to make sure I'm more present for him, more present for his little brother. And I feel like I've already been very present for my daughter, not because she's my little angel, but just by circumstance in the last, since she's been alive for 7 years, I've been around a little bit more than I was previously when the height of the war and the GWATs. But and then obviously as a husband, and just be able to spend good quality time with the family. But I still have a lot of goals and ambitions when it comes to business, goals and ambitions when it comes to other entrepreneurial opportunities that have kind of fallen in my lap. So I'm excited to take that on, kind of switch hats, take the uniform off, if you will, and then try to go kind of in the boardroom and take over the world, if as a CEO of a few different ventures. So we'll see what kind of pans out with that. But I also don't want to get too far down, focused on that, kind of the new goals and ambitions when it comes to what jobs I'll be doing. Because again, I want to focus on having that time with the family and buying back some of that time with the boys. So that's where I'm at. That's where my focus. We've already been kind of setting the foundation for that for a while. We bought a big parcel of land where we live in the middle of nowhere. Unfortunately, sometimes there's no cell phone reception or Wi-Fi. But aside from that, we are very excited for this next chapter. In fact, my wife, we're actually going to have her family moving out here on the property as well. So it's going to be pretty cool to have 4 generations on one homestead. So it's going to be cool for the kids to be able to experience that.
That's amazing. Talking about the next step and about balancing relationships and fatherhood, what are the lessons that you want to impart onto your kids in this next phase that you had to learn the hard way, that you don't want your kids to learn the hard way, knowing that sometimes kids just don't want to listen? But what would be the lesson that you want them to learn?
I've definitely, and I know I'm not naive to the fact that I've given my children a life that I didn't have growing up, and I don't ever want them to take that for granted. That's one thing that I've really tried to push on them and impart on them, if you will, is making sure that my kids know kind of the price of the cost of a dollar, if you will, the sacrifice that it takes to be able to be successful. And success doesn't always mean having $1 million in the bank account. But I want them to have the understanding that if they have a dream in their heart, they can achieve it through just unfailing hard work and dedication towards that goal. And that's something that I hope that with both my boys, who are complete opposites when it comes to what they're into, which is cool to see their individuality come out as young teens, and seeing kind of where they want to go in life. And I'm sure it could change the next few years as they graduate and depart high school. But it is really cool to see, and I'm happy that they have mentors in their lives, and not just me. They have my wife, who's phenomenal. She served in special operations, phenomenal officer, and then works as a Fed now, and she's going through her doctoral program. So for them to see someone very motivated like that and one in the same house, and then I'm kind of a knuckle dragger, but I'm always trying to achieve the next thing, whether it's in competition as a coach or as a business owner or as a soldier. So I really hope that we're able to impart that on them. And I'm not naive that it's not just me and my wife or anybody else that has an influence on them. It could be a coach. Just like for me, I had a coach that still to this day I talk to. He's my high school coach growing up. So having kind of those good mentors for our kids to be around, like especially around the gym community, they have some awesome people they can look at, and you can already see. Like my kids won't listen to me when I coach them, which is hilarious. I've wrestled my entire life. My kids look at me like I'm just like nerdy dad, but they'll listen to, one of the 20-year-old wrestling coaches, assistant wrestling coaches at our gym, so it's cool to see who they kind of want to emulate or who they kind of gravitate towards. I think it's important for us as parents to make sure that we bring the right people around our children, because you never know who they're going to want to emulate, right, wrong, or indifferent. So anyways, yeah, that's something that I've really kind of looked at more through the lens of, all right, maybe I'm not who my boys want to emulate, which is completely fine, because I am dad, I am the disciplinarian in the house, I am the one that has to kind of hold them accountable. So maybe I put them in front of the right people like Topaz or Rich or other people around the gym that maybe they want to emulate one day. And if they turn out like those guys, then I'm successful.
I'm sitting here giggling as you talk about, our kids and who they want to listen to, because I started my jujitsu journey just about a year ago. So I'm still, a brand new white belt that's like trying to figure things out. Where does my hand go? Where does my leg go? Right. All of those pieces. And my son's been doing it for a couple of years now. And so he definitely does want to listen to me. He's trying to school me. Right. But he'll listen to Topaz. But then on other parts, he'll listen to me, especially when it comes to like, he loves science and he loves like nature. And so then, then he'll listen to me. Then he's like, okay, mom, you're actually smart about that. But jujitsu, you're just a brand new white belt where I'm not going to listen to you. So what you say is so true, how kids will only listen when they want to. You talk about leaving the next thing for your kids and just being able to spend time with them, which I love. And I'm so excited for you guys. But for that, that's a journey to be able to get there and to be able to have that next part. And talking about resilience and mental health, there's a lot of tools that you need. And you talked about 2 tools, right? Your faith, having faith, walking in that faith, and having an outlet, right? For you, it's working out and jujitsu and other tools such as that. Besides those 2, what have been other tools in your arsenal that you have found highly successful for you to be able to lean on in the times that you need, as you've hit those rock bottom moments, or those moments that you have doubted yourself, or that you have hit a low that you really needed, besides hitting your knees for prayer or hitting the gym?
Yeah. So talking, even right now, there's reflection happening right now as you and I are speaking. And I feel like opening up more, which is something that it had a negative connotation for a long time in the military, especially if you say, I'm having these negative thoughts or I'm depressed or anything like that, then you would be ostracized for it. And I would say the military is a lot better off now than it was previously with that. I still think there may be a stigma in some smaller areas of the military. So I think talking, and it doesn't have to be talking necessarily to a psych or anything like that. It could be just talking to someone that you trust. It could be reaching out to a mentor and being honest and being vulnerable. And that's something that I think us as high performing adults, as leaders, it's difficult for us to be vulnerable. But you do look at some of those senior leaders now, and I've looked at it more and more like, who does that person have? Especially the ones that have been married to the Corps or married to the Army or married to the Air Force. And you can almost look at certain individuals without judging, but you look at them like, man, once that guy's retired, that gal's retired, what are they going to have? So I think it's twofold. It's one, that me personally, being able to speak to people and be vulnerable and be honest with not only myself, but with them about how I'm feeling, because chances are they probably can give me some feedback on times they felt the same way. But also us to look at our peers or even our leaders and look at them and like, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? Where are you going Thanksgiving? There's like just little basic things like that I feel like we could really change the culture, whether in the veteran culture or in the military or even in business in general, just in industry, being able to look at even our superiors who sometimes we don't want to speak to, but asking them how they're doing. And I think it's something that's lost in a lot of people. As a hardened infantryman, we don't hear that a lot. People don't come to me and say, how are you feeling, Colton? But maybe they should. Maybe that is tough. Maybe that is it's not maybe, that is a sign of strength. If I can be honest with people, be vulnerable, and or I'm able to actually speak to people and ask them how they're doing. So that's just, again, that's that kind of education, that culture shift that needs to happen, not only in the military, but beyond. And kind of give up the bravado and the, I'm just a tough dude kind of aspect to how we carry ourselves. But Yeah, that's something that I've been trying to focus on recently, more recently now, is making sure I'm asking people how they're doing, honestly, trying to get feedback from them and then giving them feedback on troubles that I've had in my life so they know that I'm not just perfect, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you talk about healthy masculinity, and I think, what you just said is a perfect example of that, right? Letting go of the bravado and being in touch with your emotions and recognizing there's more than just five, right? There's a whole litany of them, and
Yeah.
being able to be open and vulnerable and just being your authentic self, whether it's with another guy or with your community. And I love that. Thank you for sharing that. In all of this, in all of your, your peak moments and your rock bottom moments, through all of those storms, what did the storm leave behind that you're so grateful for? Those lessons that, made you rise and become tougher, wiser, that you're just like, it really sucked to go through that. But because of that, I am where I am now, and I'm grateful for that.
Man, the loss, I've learned a lot more, and it's hard for me not to circle back to my faith. I've learned a lot more about my faith, a lot about, who I am as a Christian, and that our fact of our time on earth is just a fraction of a decimal of a percentage point of the time we're going to live an everlasting life in heaven. And that's a promise that's been made to me that I know in my heart and soul. And I know not everybody knows God or has a relationship with God and Jesus Christ, but that is something that it took me a long time to fully grasp, that what we're doing on this earth, yes, it's important, and it is. You don't want to squander it by any means, especially the gifts that you've been given, especially if you're a Christian and you believe that. But my time in everlasting life in heaven is going to be far superior and far longer than my time on this earth, which also gives me almost cause for, I do not want to waste my time here, and I want to do things with the people that I love and for the people that I love, build a lasting legacy for my children, for their children, for generations to come. And that's why when we led off of this conversation, I talked about generational curses, things that have kind of hurt my family for generations on both sides. And that's why it's important for me to kind of be one of those barriers that stop those generational curses the best I can. My sister, the same way. I have a sister, same mom, same dad. I have several half sisters and half brothers, but my sister with the same mom, same dad, she's done the same thing. She's stubborn like I am, but she's been wildly successful in what she does. So seeing the impacts that her and I have made for generations to come, for our children, for my nieces, her daughters, and then for my kids, I feel like that's where I look at future, and that's kind of the foundation that I want to build for again our children. It's hard not to go back to that. So I'd say lessons wise, that's, it's a short time we have on this earth, and it can be taken away very quickly, as we both know. I want to make sure that I leave an impact on those around me in a positive way.
Yeah, I love that. So we're going to shift a little bit, a lightning round. A walking song that defines you.
A song?
Uh-huh.
Oh, a song.
A
A
song.
song.
Yeah.
A song that defines me. Oh man. So there is a White Snake, Here I Go Again, has been my walkout song for probably, I don't know, 10 fights. So Here I Go Again on My Own,
I know
is a
that
song
song.
that, yeah, when I hear it, it just, lights me up. And it may seem a little counterintuitive when you're talking about going on your own, like no one else is with you and you're doing this all by yourself. But it just does give me it does give me motivation, and it's one of those things where I love music, so it's one of those things where I hear the song and it just gets me like in the zone to conquer anything. So, yeah, Snake, Here I Go Again on My Own is something that, yeah, anytime I hear it, I get fired up.
Awesome. Your hardest opponent, whether it was inside the cage as a fighter or
Oh
within your
man.
community.
Oh, hardest opponent. Hardest opponent on paper would be Robert Whitaker. He was the middleweight champion of the world. Has done amazing. He still fights in the UFC. Done amazing things. He's an amazing man as well. He like bone marrow transplant for his kid, like, which is really painful. Just an amazing human being. To fight him, I was the first one in his career to knock him down. It was a really close fight, back and forth, and he ended up knocking me down, beating me, TKOing me. So I would say on paper, as my hardest opponent would definitely be Robert Whitaker, and I'm happy for his success. It's pretty cool to see two Ultimate Fighter winners and where we've kind of gone in our lives since that moment in UFC 160 out in Vegas and MGM Grand. So I would say, yeah, my hardest opponent would be him. And I know it'd be cliche to say I'm my hardest opponent, but I have been my own worst enemy at times. So you could say Robert Whitaker or myself are probably my two hardest opponents I've had throughout life.
Most underrated skill in combat.
In combat,
Yeah.
most underrated skill in combat. Huh. All right. I am an MRE culinary specialist. I can make the most amazing MRE, Ranger pudding, taking some wonderful beef rav and crush up some of the Cheez-Its and mix it in there with some Tabasco sauce, a little bit of a jalapeno cheese. Yes, that is something in and out of combat. If I get my hands on a box of MREs, I'm going to make some pretty amazing concoctions, which is hilarious because I am not very good at cooking at all.
That is hilarious. I'll have to make a mental note on that one.
Absolutely.
The worst advice you've ever received in your life.
Worst advice I've ever received in my life. Oh man, that's a tough one.
I
I
know, because
don't,
most people could say their best, but I want to know what was the worst.
what's the worst advice I've ever received? You know, I had a first sergeant early on in my career, and he would he would he would almost force you to buy into this annuity. I don't know if he got like a kickback from it, but everybody was buying into this like weird annuity thing. And I remember it would just come out of your paycheck every month. And it probably wasn't until I was like 3 or 4 years in when I realized that I was losing 200 some dollars of my paycheck, to this annuity that I was paying into. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me where it was going or what this company was. And it took me a long time to recoup that money. And then once I recouped it, huge penalty. So, yeah, I had this first sergeant. He was interesting character. I won't say his name, and was one of those leaders I did not learn a lot from. Obviously, maybe what not to be, but yes, he was. He did some things that were probably questionable. Nowadays, it would not fly, but back in 2005, 2006, 2007, he got away with a lot of stuff, and that was one of the things he did with all the Joes in the company. We all paid into some random annuity. I'm sure he probably had some part in that, but that was probably the worst advice I ever received. And I wasted a lot, three years of money, of paychecks going into that as a young soldier. So,
Ouchie. Okay,
yeah.
last one in the lightning round. Your favorite recovery food?
Favorite recovery food? Recovery as in like after weigh-ins or recovery as in like
Doesn't matter
comfort food?
whether it's from weigh-ins or from working out. Like, what is your
Okay.
go-to?
Favorite recovery food. I love Smoothie King. I love tropical smoothie. I am a sucker for that. I could definitely go Smoothie King or tropical smoothie almost every single day and pack it full of everything. And I know it's not the best thing in the world. There's a bunch of sugar in there, but I would say that's probably my go-to is a good protein smoothie from tropical smoothie or Smoothie King.
Nice. So as we wrap this up, and if somebody was listening to this, which I know that they will because you have dropped a ton of great information, as they're listening, because I want people to be able to know that they're not alone, that they're going to be seen, they're going to be heard, and they shouldn't be ashamed. And if you were talking to them, what do you want them to know? And what would you want to say to them in their own journey if they're sitting at rock bottom?
Yeah. Make the best case scenario for your situation. And that's not just in athletics, that's in life. Your past does not define you. Your past mistakes do not define you. You can rise above that. And again, you're not in competition with anyone else. You're in a way in competition with yourself, who you are today, and trying to be the better version of you tomorrow. We're going to have setbacks. We're going to have situations in life that, again, may be out of our grasp or out of our control that may happen to us, and it's unfair. But we can't dwell on that. And again, like I said, it cannot define you. So find your outlet. If you're a Christian or you want to be a Christian, find a good Bible-based church. If you are into jujitsu or you don't know if you are, go find an awesome jujitsu program. Go find a fitness program. If you're into video games, find a club, a reading club, book club. Doesn't matter. I want people to find that positive outlet for them that can help them get past kind of maybe the worst day of their lives that they had to endure or something that happened to them. But it doesn't define them, and they can rise above it and continue on the path forward in life. And nothing is ever hard enough that you can't get past. So please do not do anything that could be permanent, whether that's hurting yourself or making a decision that you can't come back from. There's always somebody there that's willing to listen to you, and there's so many opportunities in this wonderful country we live in for you to find help. So that's what I hope, if someone was listening to this and they were hitting rock bottom, to be able to find their outlet and allow their past not to define them.
I love that. And where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at Colton Smith MMA on Instagram, Colton Smith MMA on Facebook, or Enlisted 9 Fight Company on either one. And so look forward to speaking to anybody that wants to reach out and have any questions about my journey. I'm a pretty open book, and I'd love to share with them.
Thank you so much, Colton, for spending time with me. I know you stay busy, and the fact that you gifted me time, I truly appreciate that. Thanks for everything that you do for our community and just for being an amazing leader, follower of Christ. And thank you. Thanks for being here. Keep rising, keep speaking your truth, and always remember, you are the storm.